Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're all doing great. We haven't done a webinar in the afternoon for a while. We normally do them in the morning, usually pumped up by coffee by then, so feeling a little bit flagging this afternoon, as we imagine all of you are as well. So today we've got Mike back. Mike spoke a few months ago on Scribe Academy. He was giving us an overview of grant funding. He's back now. We invited him back. And he accepted, which is we're really happy about. And he's been talking about organising successful community events for town and parish councils. So let's get an idea of where you all are at. So if you'd like to just drop on the chat, say hi, where you're based, and maybe if you booked a holiday for this summer or April, let us know where you're going on holiday. So just jump on the chat there and introduce yourself to all the people here. So we've got Andrew's first to the keyboard there in Workington. No one going anywhere on holiday. Nice. I can't see. Claywood, Somerset, Horsford Town Council, Steph, welcome. Felixstowe, hi guys, how you doing? Debbie, good. Turkey, oh good, it's going to Turkey. That's going too fast now, I can't work out what's going on. Wisbech, I've been there a few times. I was there nearby the other day. And Felixstowe again, hi Sue. Good, really good to see. Going to Whitley Bay, Karen, nice, going local. Yeah, really good to see you all today. It's proved quite a popular event. We had over about 195 registrations. We currently got 89. I presume that is because there's going to be some interesting things coming up in the next month or so with King's Coronation. So, Mike, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. Thanks, John.
Good, and yeah, just wondered. So you're currently full-time consulting now, and that is kind of main. So what do you exactly do?
It's mainly helping out county associations with training, but I also help individual councils and charities as well with things like project management, funding applications, things like that.
Okay, good. If there's any county associations out there on the chat, just say hi and what county association you're representing, that would be good. And so what did you do before you were consulting? What's your...
I actually worked in nature conservation for over 20 years. And later on I spent nearly 10 years as a parish councillor as well, where I live in Staffordshire. So I do know how local councils work or they don't work sometimes as well. So
yeah, good. And yeah, so where were you based?
In Staffordshire.
In Staffordshire, yeah, good. And what would your perfect job be in the world, or no job?
Oh God, that's a difficult one. I suppose it depends what age you are in life, really. At the moment, just something very easy that pays well, I think.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, good. And yeah, what do you do while you're not working? What do you get up to?
It's all very boring, I'm afraid. Things like gardening, I've got an allotment, family, and watching football, so things like that.
Good. Who do you support?
I don't know if I should mention it, really. My credibility might go down, but I'm originally from London, from South London, so I'm a Millwall supporter.
Oh, that's a bit dangerous. So I think the Millwall supporters have calmed down a bit over the years. So, over to you, Mike.
Thanks, John. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone can see my slides. I've actually got 10 minutes before I talked before someone pointed out that they weren't showing. So
that's all good. All good.
Are they okay? Good. Thanks, John. This is actually a truncated version of a presentation I normally provide to local county councillors, county associations. I actually put it together just over 3 years ago, and we were supposed to run it in March 2020. And for obvious reasons, late March wasn't a great time for community events. So it took about a year to run it again. But hopefully, as John sort of mentioned, things are picking up again now and getting gradually back to normal. This session today will cover two distinct sections. The first part examines the planning and the management of council events, which really is the most important. But then I will cover those horrible issues, I'm afraid, like the health and safety and the risk assessments as well. And just very quickly about myself, as I said, I do have over 30 years experience of managing successful and dare I say, unsuccessful public events, where unfortunately you can learn just as much about how to actually manage something. And I also previously worked in nature conservation for 20 years, as I mentioned, where I was responsible for running a range of public activities and events. And then later, as a parish councillor, I did develop and manage a number of community projects and events. So I did see it from a local council side as well. And just thinking about before you run any events, the first consideration really is to establish your goals and objectives. And it might sound obvious, but the goals are very different actually from objectives. We often get them confused, but goals tend to be the broad outcomes that you intend to achieve, such as enhancing community engagement for your local council or if it's a charity. Whereas objectives tend to be the actions or the specific targets for those goals. So quite often we arrange and run activities without really evaluating while we're doing them. So think about why you're planning your event and what's the purpose of it and what outcomes do you require from it. I'd love to go into more detail here. This is a very much a truncated version of my 2-hour presentation that I normally give, but there are some really good examples of when you might run an event and not really achieve what you're after. And establish the nature of your target audience for your event as well, or the expected number of attendees. Also, always consider things like who you really want to come, and is it a specific stakeholder or demographic target, such it could be older residents or a specific ethnic group, or the whole parish or a particular ward or an area, or perhaps it's a target group that you're after, such as young families and children. Or maybe it might be even tourists and visitors if you're lucky enough to get those people to your area. So do really think long and hard about who's going to be interested and who might attend. And consider any limitations or barriers to engagement as well. Sometimes your target audience might be quite difficult to reach, and you'll need to employ different methods to attract these groups to engage or attend. And I've always found, for instance, teenagers to be the hardest group to engage with in activities, unless you've got some direct contacts to that community. But other difficult targets might be older people, especially if we start solely relying on digital publicity. And meanwhile, some groups can face higher rates of isolation and more difficult to reach. So people within our communities might not have fully engaged properly since COVID restrictions were lifted, for example. While some members of ethnic minority communities might feel excluded, particularly if language is a barrier. So we just need to consider some of the best ways to reach the wider groups and remove any obstacles, especially to those people who are traditionally underrepresented, especially if they're part of our target audience that we want to reach. And John has just sort of been touching on some of the types of events, and I won't go into too much detail here, but your approach will vary greatly on the nature of event that you're aiming for. And there's a great variety of indoor community events, but it is worth doing your research just to pick up tips and ideas. And I must admit, I always just go onto Google and I have a good search around, and it's amazing what you can pick up. And there's just as great an array of outdoor activities as well that most local councils are typically involved in managing. And these obviously all require very different approaches and planning for. And most events will require adequate resources and support to be effective or successful. And the 3 key factors are just summed up very simply by this slide are going to be funding, people, or shown here as resources, but really it means your officers, your councillors, volunteers and partners, and then that time and energy as well. And to be honest, you can't really put on a good event without at least one or all 3 of these. Unless you have oodles of resources, which most councils don't, you're going to have to plan really carefully to match your event to the resources available. And the most important consideration is to really plan ahead. If you go away with one thing from today, it's about that planning really. And good preparation is always essential. So never assume anything, no matter how many times that you've managed the same type of event. It always helps to run through your planning stages again and again. To start well in advance and give yourself enough time to plan and prepare and organise everything. I've just included an events timeline here, and there's loads of different templates on the internet. Unfortunately, and most of them seem to be from the US, where they're very complicated, quite a few of them, and you do have to pay for them. So just be wary of them. It can be something very simple that you do yourself, even on a spreadsheet or even a Word document. I usually just knock something up on Word, my own little table. And it goes without saying, but the bigger the event, the more work that's going to be involved. And you can't do everything yourself. So try and enlist help just to share that workload. And it pays to have a designated project leader if you can. I know there's not always one person, but if there is one person, it can help. And also remember that your clerk or your officer might need extra support too. That should go without saying. And enlisting help is going to share the responsibility for the event organisation. And it brings together an array of different skills and experience that you might not normally have. And again, it eases that workload. And do think about asking other local groups or partners to get involved if possible. They might be able to bring something different to the event, or be willing to take responsibility for a particular aspect, which gives you less to have to think about or to organise. And it really does help sometimes to share that responsibility. And if you are having a large event, you might want to form a small working group. I know we're sick to death of committees and more groups and things, but just as a short-term venture, it can be very, very beneficial, really. And if you've got the right people on it. And I mentioned budgets because any activities are going to be really dependent on tight finances. So it's really important to establish a clear and realistic budget that's ensuring all your potential costs are included, and allow a contingency from unpredicted expenses. And do try to be realistic, because it's much better to underestimate the income and slightly overestimate your costs. I've experienced this on a number of occasions, and it really comes back to bite you on the backside, especially at the last minute when you're running out of money. And think carefully how you might cover these costs. In some cases, this might be covered by the council or largely absorbed by your volunteer input. Some events, however, will need additional funding, which, as on the right here, usually comes from things like entrance fees, funding or sponsorship, voluntary donations, event activities and entertainment. And you might also be able to charge some vendors as well, such as stall holders and catering suppliers, if it's a lucrative event. So that's another potential income. These are all things that you can plan for and put on your spreadsheets. And venue and location, where's best for your event? Most councils have little choice of venues realistically, whether it's indoor or outdoor, but wherever you're going to host the event is obviously going to have a big impact on what kind of occasion it's going to be. And just as importantly, think about your site layout. It helps to create a very basic event plan, just showing the key features and activity locations. And with regard to things like capacity and space, do ensure that the venue is a suitable size for all the planned activities, with ample space for visitors to move freely around or among activities. I know this is something that a lot of councils do experience when there's something very popular going on. We have it ourselves when we have our Christmas activities. We put on a show for kids, and we've had to put on 2 shows now on the same day because we found we were sort of dangerously going over the capacity. And there must also be unobstructed routes to exits. So it's particularly important at indoor events to prevent things like furniture, stalls or goods that are obstructing exit routes and doors. And again, this goes without saying, but this often happens as well during an event as well. People will move things, and so you have to keep an eye on that. And do consider the facilities and equipment. So for instance, is there adequate and accessible toilet provision? How will they be maintained in a hygienic state throughout the event? Is there adequate access to services such as water or electricity? And try and assess what equipment's going to be needed on the day. You might need to really plan for that. And when it comes to access, do try to consider issues of equal access for all. It's something we can forget, really. And arrangements should really be made to ensure that disabled visitors have adequate facilities, things such as parking, toilets, specific viewing areas so they can safely enjoy the event, and how easy it's going to be to get to the venue, especially for remote outdoor events. And just consider as well if there's any local transport links. I know that can be difficult for more rural based councils, but sometimes we can actually include that information or tweak what we're trying to do. And one of the first and most obvious considerations is to decide on a date and time to hold your event. But doing this, before doing this, there are some really important factors to think about, such as the likely availability of third-party providers, like the people such as caterers, vendors, entertainment, acts and equipment, even your volunteers as well. So check people haven't got existing commitments. And if have any specific suppliers in mind, it's really important to try and contact them as early on as possible to try and just to ensure that they're available really, and try to avoid any clashes with any similar activities and dates or obviously busy periods. So think about the impact of things like school holiday periods and consider seasonality. So just use an example here from Buckinghamshire, but it's going to be the same for around the country really. And find out what bookings, permissions and licenses you need. Again, it's obvious, but make sure first that you've definitely booked the venue. I'm sure like me, you've done the same, but even if it's your own property, double bookings are far too common, and I've had it once or twice. So whether it's your own fault or not, it can lead to a nightmare when it actually leads up to an event. So always ensure that you allow enough time to provide things like just double checking you've got this site. Things like providing access for setting up and clearing away. It's that time really, and check the details of exactly what third-party providers are going to supply on the day. So your vendors, your entertainers and your caterers, and think about equipment, anything that you might need to hire or buy, that make sure you know how to use it as well. And once you're satisfied with your vendors' availability, or whoever your suppliers, with their availability and price, then you can go ahead and confirm. And it's important to secure written confirmation of all bookings. You probably won't be exchanging contracts, but something in writing is really, really important. And send similar confirmation to all suppliers and contractors with clear details, such as things like what's expected of them and when to arrive, set up and removal arrangements, and do follow up with phone calls as the event gets closer. And when it does actually come to license and permissions, find out about regulations for your venue early on, as it can take months for some licenses to be granted. And so that's not a problem you want to be facing if you're getting closer and closer to your event. And think about developing a simple marketing or promotion plan. This is really important if you want to attract more people to your events. And it can also help you organise and plan your activity a lot better as well. And you can give your event a name or a title, something relevant and catchy, something we don't always do. And get publicity out there early, even if you don't always include all the final details at first. You can do that as you get closer to the event. And depending on your budget and the event size or scale, there's lots of promotional tools at hand to publicise events, especially that local councils are usually quite good at. Things like posters and flyers are traditional methods. And think about who can produce these and how they'll be distributed. And make sure you include all the essential information, such as the basic, the what, the where, the who, the when type details. So often I see flyers, you think, oh, why didn't they say what time or what day or who's putting this together? So don't forget to put all those elements on there. And so do have a look at the different examples that people use for promoting their events. And social media has come to the forefront in recent years, but a website is still very useful, and many councils are getting much better at utilising these to publicise their activities. And I appreciate it does take a bit of work, but it is really important to keep these pages updated and uploaded with new information. And just as importantly, it's really beneficial to feedback afterwards on any activities and how they went, especially successful ones. And don't just use your own websites. Think about what other organisations or partners in your area that might be able to publicise your events. That can be just as important, really. And if it's a big festival or event, you might even think about setting up a specific website or a social media account, which I'll come on to. In every topic I deliver, that there's usually one or two organisations that stand out. And I must admit, the teacher's pet for this one is Buckinghamshire Town Council. I've worked with about 7 different county associations, and Buckinghamshire on events. It does seem to be quite good with this particular town council. And I know they've got more resources at hand. They've actually got staff who are designated towards this, and to organise their own town's events programme. And I'm not saying that every other council will be able to replicate these resources, but they do provide quite an exemplar of events management. So have a look at their website just to get a sense of what can be effectively achieved. I think there's another council in Somerset called West Monkton, and they're another really good parish council I've looked at, where their publicity about events is really, really impressive. And I've mentioned social media, but most local councils have created their own accounts on traditional, as they're now known, social media with Facebook and Twitter. And these are a great way to reach target members very quickly and at no expense. But never forget what platforms your target stakeholders use. So it's going back to that difficult to reach group slide that I mentioned. It's easy to forget your target demographic sometimes, and young users especially are usually far more active on platforms such as Instagram, TikTok, or even YouTube. So these are the sort of things that we have to consider if we want to try and reach people via social media, especially that sort of age group. I'd be very interested if there's any participants today, any delegates who actually do use those platforms. And also utilising the media. Although sales of traditional local newspapers are in decline, if used well, local press coverage can still be really beneficial in promoting your events. And much of their readership seems to have gone online now, but that's fine. And it helps if you have an existing relationship with your local papers or your radio stations. And then the next step is to develop and send a press release to these outlets. And good press releases can be the real cornerstone to getting media coverage. So it pays to master the art of writing them, and also have a really good understanding of how journalists work and what they're looking for. It's really key. So it's almost a separate subject in itself, is getting press coverage, but it is really, really important sometimes. And you might have an opportunity to publicise forthcoming events in local magazines and community newsletters. And as with all such publicity and promotion, it really pays to follow up with positive reports afterwards and attractive photographs. So beforehand, it's a great idea to take photos, and something that we're often too busy to think about, especially on the day of an event. But these images can be really used quite powerfully to publicise and celebrate the occasion, and also your council as well, and what it's achieving. And with local newspapers cutting back on their own photographers, you should always arrange in advance to take your own images beforehand as a photo call. There's 1 or 2, 3 here on the left. And also during events to send afterwards to the press. This is really, really important, and it's something that many of us do forget to do. And one of my pet subjects is this, is profile, but never forget an event is a real opportunity to raise awareness of your council's profile. I do confess this is something that I find that so many councils could be doing so much better and that includes my own council as well. And your event is a great chance to highlight who your council is and what you do, and don't assume that people already know that. It used to really frustrate me to attend my own parish council events without any indication of who was behind the whole thing, or very little indication. So if your council does something special or worthwhile, do let people know about it. People will be quick enough to criticise your council about anything they're not happy with. So if you don't blow your own trumpet, no one else will. And use your logo and contact details wherever possible, and keep hammering this home, because events as well, I hate to be cynical about it, but they are also a marketing exercise as well for your council, which can be just as important. And there's many potential site and venue considerations to plan for. So these include things like what security arrangements are necessary, such as overnight security and cash handling, attendance, how many people have you allocated for, and do you have the right facilities, rubbish disposal, arrangements need to be made for waste disposal and rubbish clearance and collection. Things like signage. This is one on the bottom right here from a parish council event, which I'm not sure is really up to speed, but will you need to put signs up on the surrounding routes to make the event easier to find? And things like ticketing, if there's a charge, will tickets need to be bought in advance or at the door? And advance tickets, even if admission is free, they can really help you assess the level of interest and the numbers to plan for. I know that's what we do now with our Christmas events. It's a free event, but we do have to distribute tickets just in case we get too many people. And if you hold an open air event, obviously our weather in Britain is notoriously unpredictable. So ask yourself things like what impact adverse weather could have, and is there shelter for visitors from either heavy rain or strong sunlight? And also consider the impact of noise on the event on the local neighbourhood, something that quite common, especially for any music events. And with volunteers, you might need people to assist you during the setup, the delivery and the takedown afterwards. And to help organise this, just consider putting together a personnel rota for all the tasks and allocation among volunteers. And once you've allocated your tasks, brief helpers on what's required. If you can, try and send out as much of this information beforehand, because it really helps. And if there's time, organise a briefing just before the event starts and ensure that they're able to communicate and keep you informed of progress. It's much easier now with mobile phones, but it's important that you stay in touch, not only just to help you organise, but especially to deal with any emergency situations. And some sporting events are often stewarded as well, and bigger events. So the main responsibility of a steward is going to be things like crowd management and people safety. So they'll need to be particularly well briefed, and also ensure that they're easily identifiable by wearing things like high-vis jackets, things like tabards, or just coloured t-shirts. And sustainability, keeping things local is something that most council are already very good at, especially supporting local businesses when you're hiring or purchase equipment and services. And I think many councils are also getting better at encouraging the use or sale of local food and drink and produce where possible. It's something we could still work at, but I think it is improving. And also try to think green if you can. So when you contact potential vendors and providers, just ask if they've got any sustainable practices in place and any environmentally friendly produce that they use. And if you can, try to avoid things like bottled water or drinks where possible, and try to use things diluted with tap water if you can, or avoid using single-use items such as plastic cups, glasses, plates and cutlery. I know a lot of unitary councils are really going in quite hard for this now. And when it comes to access, if appropriate, think about setting up group transportation or shuttle buses so that you can transport more people at once. This can deter the overuse of individual cars or parking in residential streets if you're doing something like, say, an open gardens day or something like that. And if possible, hold the event somewhere easy to access for public transport or for walking or for cycling. I know it's not always that easy to do, but sometimes we have that option. And for outdoor events, if you're using a park or an open space, you just consider the wildlife and habitats in and around that space. Could these be disturbed or trampled by what you're putting on, which can happen? And you can relieve a lot of pressure by taking care of tasks several days ahead. So run through the details of the event. Where is everyone going to be on the day? Are all the jobs covered, or do you need a last minute ring around to fill any gaps? Have you arranged all the paperwork that's needed? Who's responsible for money on the day? And will you need a lot of change? Have you thought about things like welfare arrangements, such as breaks and refreshments and storage of personal items? These are things that I've put together so many different events over the years, and you still have to stop yourself when you're planning and think, oh, I hadn't thought of that. So it really does help, especially if it's a big event, you've got a lot of people there. It helps to plan for this. And immediately before your event, do any last minute shopping. So some items such as perishable goods need to be purchased right beforehand. So just plan ahead with that. And it takes the stress off as well. And if you've spearheaded the day, you should really be getting there first. So arrive well before everyone else. And this will allow you to feel more in control and address any unexpected issues. And it always helps then to carry out an inspection of the venue or the site and make a detailed safety check. And as the slide shows, you can check things like fire exits and access routes clear and appropriate lit if indoors, and any necessary equipment is present and working properly. And don't forget to make sure projectors and microphones or public address systems are working and can be heard in all areas. I don't know how many times I've been to an event where I've been speaking and either the microphone or the projector isn't working, and we spend 10-15 minutes trying to sort it out. It's very common, but it can be avoided with a bit of planning and just a little bit of a forethought, really. And finally, remember things like just giving your volunteers support and encouragement, and just making sure that everyone gets a break as well, because sometimes there can be a lot of pressure on volunteers, especially if they're remotely located. And mopping up after the event, do plan your clearance ahead, as this is usually the part of the event that most people fail to plan for. And it's also the part of the event most of us hate most as well. The bigger the occasion, obviously the greater cleanup's going to be afterwards. So carry out a post-site inspection and ensure nothing's been left on site, or especially anything hazardous to future users. And this should also identify any record of damage as well. That can be quite important as well for future reference. Ensure you have enough volunteers to clear up. Make sure equipment or utensils are properly cleaned and dried and stored away as soon as possible. I can't remember the amount of times gone to start an event with a marquee, opened it up and realised it's all mouldy and damp from a previous use the summer before. It's so frustrating, but it helps if everyone does their part. And also try to have all your cleanup supplies and your equipment ready beforehand. I must admit, this doesn't come naturally to me, but it means you can start the cleanup immediately after guests leave, and also ensures your team is prepared to handle urgent messages as they occur. And finally, things like where the cash has been collected or taken, this should really be accounted for and banked as soon as possible. And it just avoids any complications in the future. And soon afterwards, do remember to thank your volunteers and your helpers. That this means obviously a great deal to most people. And try to report back and thank any funders, sponsors, vendors and entertainers. And if the event took place to raise money for a good cause, find a way to publicise how much was raised and thank people for their contribution. I know I've been involved in events where I've given my time freely and my services, and I haven't been thanked for it. And that wasn't the reason I was doing it for, but you do remember, and I think it's only human nature, really. And when it comes to debrief and evaluation, it's always good to have a look back and learn for next time. So have a debrief chat with your group to discuss what went well or could have been better. That's something my council used to do and are quite good at. And did you meet your event objectives and your overall goal? So going back to that very early slide. And finally, feedback. Think about how to gather those comments from guests and people who've contributed to the event. So you could consider an exit questionnaire at the event, recording any good or bad comments that you've received, maybe a web link for online surveys. You'll have to promote this in advance. It could be in an events program even, but it's something you can do. And also contact the key people who've helped and ask for their thoughts. I've included another image here from Buckingham Town Councils, but they have a request page especially devoted on their website, which is a really good idea. And now just quickly on to everyone's favourite subject, but risk assessment. As an event organiser, you do have a duty to plan, to manage and monitor. So making sure that participants and the public are not exposed to health and safety risks. And these requirements are really integral to running public events. And at the heart of all effective health and safety policies, you'll find these assessments. And all the elements for an event will require a risk assessment. And this is usually just a careful examination of anything that could cause harm at your event. And then should consider possible hazards and the measures needed to minimise the risk of harm or injury to anyone attending or working at your event. So all organisations are required to appoint at least one person to oversee, to supervise and to assist in all health and safety matters that comply with legislation. So you are legally required to assess the risks at your venues so that you do put in place a plan to control any risks. And in addition, all suppliers, contractors and any activity providers, even if they're volunteers at an event, should be asked to provide a risk assessment for any separate activities that they're providing. And risk assessments are all about considering and addressing hazards and risks. So when thinking about your assessment, do remember that a hazard is anything that can cause you harm. And every event environment naturally has hazards that could cause injuries or ill health. And the risk is, I don't want to sort of teach Granny to suck eggs here, but it's usually the chance of high, medium or low that somebody could be harmed by these hazards, together with an indication of how serious the harm could be. So it's not really about being risk averse, but just eliminating unacceptable levels of risks. And it's always useful to look at other risk assessments for similar events. This assessment's from an event at a theme park, not even a local council one, but it shows many of the types of hazards we might encounter at an open air council event. And of course, indoor hazards are likely to be very different. But many site hazards, you can gauge them well in advance just by assessing the nature of the site and the nature of what the activity is going to be. So do have a look at some of the examples that are online. There are some really good tips on there as well. And I won't go into detail here, but HSE, the Health and Safety Executive, has identified 5 key stages in the risk assessment process, and all that information is on their website. And there's also many example templates to adopt as well. This one top right is HSE's template, which is probably the go-to version really, that has been adapted now by many organisations for their own assessments. And this general one as well, I have one below, is from Staffordshire County Council, and this has a risk rating with an assessment matrix, and it helps to evaluate the potential severity of harm, the likelihood of occurring, and action required. So there are different versions, but everything seems to come back to that HSE template. So if there's any organisation that you go to or any examples, that is really the go-to one. But as I say, it is always useful to look at other examples that have been completed by councils or for similar types of events. And when I put these presentations on for county associations, I usually show lots of examples from their own county or surrounding counties. And of course, please be pragmatic and don't overcomplicate the process. For many council events, the risks to hazards are probably well known, and controls measures that they're usually easy to apply. And crucially, you don't have to be a health and safety expert. If you're confident and you understand what's involved, you can easily do the assessment yourself. So please don't put off any events or activities just because you're worried about having to go through some of this health and safety, and especially risk assessment rigmarole. It really shouldn't be too much. And as you'd expect, there's some really excellent sources of guidance and support for event and risk assessments. HSE have a special section on their website, while your local unitary council should have some advice too as well. There's an example here from Milton Keynes. You might also have NAUC's, National Association's risk assessment for the COVID-19 document they produced 3 years ago, which still has some really many relevant sections in it. So do have a look at that. It's not all about, obviously, about putting on events, but it is about risk assessments. And of course, we mustn't forget that all events must also legally be covered by a separate fire risk assessment. And I won't go into detail on this, but this process mirrors normal assessments, and you won't be surprised to learn that there's also an identical 5-step approach. And if you're in doubt about any aspects of fire safety or assessments for your events, then your fire and rescue service should be able to help. Or alternatively, the National Fire Chiefs Council online also has some helpful information, including an events organisers checklist for safety planning. So they're all things that resources that you can tap into. Really worth looking at. And coming on to the main health and safety section, as the event organiser, you also have overall responsibility to ensure that your event venue and the activities comply with all health and safety regulations. And again, there's many helpful guides that are available locally or online regarding health and safety for running events. And HSE particularly have a special section on their website, even including a checklist, especially for village halls. So that's very relevant for most of us, I know. But do have a look online, as there are some guides available as well from lots of different unitary authorities and organisations around the country. I've just included one here from Shropshire and a district council in Norfolk as well. So some really good specific advice that's aimed for town and parish councils. And every organised public event is legally required as well to have first aid and medical cover. And for larger events especially, you could ask a first aid organisation to attend, or even a registered paramedic or qualified medical practitioner. And organisations such as St John Ambulance and the British Red Cross, they can work with you to develop a plan if it's particularly big or complicated events that you might be worried about. We've covered using third parties, but do make sure you always check the following are covered or in place beforehand. So things like insurance cover, health and safety policy statements, risk assessments, systems of work or method statements, and any professional or trade accreditations or qualifications and certificates that are relevant to their activities. These can be really important sometimes. And I won't spend too much time on this, but I've only got about 4 or 5 slides to go, but food and drink plays an integral part in many community events. So especially summer outdoor ones. So you must always make sure this is safe and not harmful to health or unfit for human consumption. And if you're providing catering yourself, ensure that you do follow any accepted practices for food safety. That there's lots of advice and support on this. And for all big events, it's really good practice to have plans in place should any urgent situations arise. So an emergency plan includes as many realistically dangerous scenarios as possible. And everyone working at the event should be briefed on the plan. So please know what to look out for and what to do in emergency situations. Any plan should also include any contingency proposals. So if you're holding an opener event, the weather in particular can be fickle, as I've mentioned before, especially in our country and some of our summer weather. So depending on the size and the location of your event, it could be worthwhile seeking advice from the emergency services sometimes, especially on an emergency plan. And for events where there's likely to be children and vulnerable adults, it's important to make sure all correct processes and procedures are adhered to. And all people working with children should obviously be checked with a disclosure and barring service, the DBS. So, and also designate a person who's going to be responsible for dealing with any child protection issues should they arise, and a location for reporting lost or taking found children. And if children are performing at the event, you should also ensure that any suitable child protection measures are in place, and I could even include a system of chaperones as well. So that's quite important. My daughters used to have that when I used to dance with a dance school. And not strictly health and safety, but if you are organising a public event, you will obviously require suitable public liability insurance for your council. So do check your insurance policy to see exactly what you're covered for, as you might need additional event policy cover, just depending on your activities. And finally, many councils have their own health and safety policies that encompass all the requirements for running public events and activities. And I would really strongly suggest that every council, no matter your size, that you should have an adequate policy for all matters of this in your day-to-day work as well, but especially for these big events. And sorry, yeah, that's the health and safety policies one there I meant to come on to. So there are examples, but I'm quite surprised when I look at so many councils that haven't got health and safety or adequate health and safety policies. It really is important. And finally there, I've rushed through all my slides there. I hope I don't mean too much of a sprint, but just to summarize, just to remember that, again, go back to the objectives and your target audience. So do try to keep that in mind with everything that you do. Remember that planning ahead, and things about your milestones, any deadlines and checklists that you can put together to help you. Utilise support and guidance where you can. There's lots out there. Do your best to publicise and promote your event. That is really key, and something that some councils aren't quite so good at, especially when it comes to your profile as well. Consider health and safety issues. That goes without saying, and those 5 steps to risk assessment. And I say be pragmatic, and that was in relation to risk assessments, but pragmatism as well to almost everything you do, especially when you're putting together these events. And don't be put off, because I always found putting events on for when I worked for a wildlife charity, but also with the local council, was the most rewarding thing that we ever did, and that the community got so much out of it. And as a councillor, it was the most I ever got out of doing anything. Just seeing the enjoyment and the interaction and the engagement with your communities is so important. So I think there's so much more that we can do as local councils to actually promote our events, and it can be other people's events as well, and just to get people out and involved, and it can help out it ticks so many boxes for us. And I've just been delivering events on biodiversity and as wide as health and well-being for county associations, and events comes up really importantly in all of those with our communities. So don't be put off, please. And I hope there's something that you've gained out of here that will help you. Okay, John, I think that's the end of my I can take my slides off if
Yes, unshare. Wow, Mike, that was a whistle-stop tour of everything. Really appreciate you doing that. Loads of information in there. Yes, we will be sharing the video afterwards, and with Mike's permission, we'll check if he's okay with the slides. As we said, this is a really condensed version of Mike's official training, which takes 2 hours. If you want to see the full 2-hour version, if you're a calc, obviously we've shared Mike's details. If you as a parish or town council, you could contact your calc to get him there. That was really good. Also, the chat was really good. Lots of great support in there. I'm just going to take a few minutes of your time just to give you an overview of Scribe booking. So if you guys, anybody out there, have your own venues, your own facilities, and you want to improve the administration related to it, not only to allow people to public to book your venues, pay for it, but also integration into counts. We have a dedicated cloud app for that purpose, built for town and parish councils. It's very easy to add, or you can list as many venues as you want. This is a test account here, and spaces. They could be sports facilities, village halls, town halls. You can just create add all your venue information, the location, the how many people can take, your opening hours, your photos, the activities that you can do there. That helps with SEO and marketing, and any additional charges you have. So then once anyone can book those, whether they're calling up or they can do it all online, I'll show you in a minute, but then you have all your bookings available there. You can get the status of the booking status, the payment status. You can go in and get further details, your operational notes, your customer notes, attach any files related to it. You can see all your bookings on a calendar. There's many different ways to see your venues in the calendar view there. And then once you've published it, you can have your own dedicated website. Here's an individual venue. So you've got all the photos there. You've got the map, the details, which Google will pick up that you can do. If you're looking for music practice venues in this area, it should come up. Map, calendar view, nice video, all your reviews from Google, and it's very easy for people to come in and book a venue. Just come in there, put your details in there, accept your terms and conditions, your address, just put that in there, and I've literally booked that in seconds. And then as someone making the booking, I will get an email, should hopefully be there. Oh, I haven't logged into my email. Oh, that's a failure. I'll just do that quickly. So that you should get, I've got a provisional booking there of all the details straight away. I've also got an SMS, and then I can come back. If I hit refresh here, it should be there, $15.75. I can then generate an invoice for that, send that over to the account system, and I've got my invoice there. I can just click on that invoice. I could email it to the actual person that's made the booking. I can see all my invoices related to anything, actually, bookings, allotments, etc. And then when that person's paid, you can just convert it to a receipt. Then it's all done. That's all paid for. All the data's linked, so the original invoice is linked there, so it's all good. And then I've probably got an email there, yeah, saying the payment's received. So it really is easy to kind of administer your bookings. We're doing a whole bunch of improvements. We're supporting email templates soon, so you can attach your terms and conditions, your rules and regulations. You can customize everything related to the communication that goes out. And we're also supporting multiple, so you can book multiple spaces under the same booking. So if you're organising big wedding events, etc. So if you want to know more about that, feel free to contact us when I send the email out with the webinar, etc. So that's a quick overview. So we did have some questions, Mike. There was multiple people talking about the problem with volunteers.
Yeah.
Getting volunteers, and then even when volunteers commit, then they might change their mind, or again they might commit but they might not be that good, and they might cost.
I think it's a universal problem, isn't it, really, volunteers. But then the main thing is to try and put out some requests early on, especially if volunteers might just want to do something very specific and they don't want to be involved in the whole day. So I think it's been about being able to allocate jobs. If you've got enough people, obviously. If you haven't got enough volunteers, sometimes you won't be able to be quite as ambitious as you wanted. But I never really found too much of a problem with for events with volunteers. We were quite fortunate, really. It depends what specific questions people might want to have, really. But often managing volunteers is the harder part, I find. Because you have to really, it's very different from managing in a business or anything. You have to treat people very differently. So volunteer management is a whole separate subject in itself. But yeah, it is something that I do sympathise with. If you have problems trying to get enough volunteers, especially for something like stewarding, you might have to hire stewards if need be for an event. So that's something worth considering.
Yeah, I've organised a lot of events in my time, and sometimes maybe you act more as a facilitator. So you try and get people to suggest ideas, and then that's actually a little bit of a tactic to get volunteers. So you say, so you put out, you put a call out for ideas, you've got the facilities and the spaces available, and then people suggest ideas, and then that in themselves, they're volunteering, and then you're kind of more making it possible. You're not leading it. That always works, but sometimes it's really tricky, because sometimes you do, I find of all the events I've done, sometimes you do have to just do it yourself. But then once you build up momentum and it gets popular, then people want to be involved. But and then it gets popular, and like this event I organise in Norwich every year, now people almost, I've led it for like 4 or 5 years on my own, kind of really leading it, and but now other people are leading it and taking it over, which is really good. But yeah, cool.
But pointing out that request, I think, is really useful, and because otherwise I think most of us know with our councils that it's the same old faces that end up volunteering, the same sort of core of people that do everything in your village or your parish or town. And so it is good to try and get a wider group, and it's also you engaging with that community as well.
Yes, good. I see, Liz, you've got your hand up there. Hi, Liz. You're muted.
Hi there.
There we go.
I was just going to reiterate what you said, really. I find that asking a volunteer group to volunteer again, so yes, you're getting the same people, but if you've got a good group at the church, or a good men's shed, or a good guide or scout group, then you can tap into them sort of straight away.
Yes, definitely tapping into existing community groups. Yeah. Or sometimes actually there might already be an event going on, but it's not reached its full potential, so you can just get behind that one, so it might be a community group already organising something, but you could offer your facilities up to make it bigger, and just kind of just get it more popular and bigger. Yeah,
and I touched on it, but working with other groups, as Liz mentioned there, is really important. And also it works two ways. You can piggyback as well sometimes on other events that are going on, any fetes or village or town fairs, and have a presence at that and help out as well at their events if you can, if you've got the people who can do that. And so it can work both ways, and you can build up a really good relationship with other community groups, really, because we're all after the same thing, really, trying to do what's best for our parishioners where we live.
Good, thank you.
John, do you mind me saying, I was just going, there's an incredible amount of questions. There's one or two that have come up about Martin's Law.
Yes.
Which, can I just clarify that I don't know too much at the moment. This is to do with the Manchester bombings. That there's new legislation coming out in the spring that could impact on event security, and we don't know enough about it just yet, and at what levels it would be, whether it be just for these really commercial events or whether it will be for even small scale events like ours. So until we know about that, and I'm sure NALC will be putting out some national guidance and advice on this, but until we know more about that when it comes out, then we really can't say at the moment, but it is something we will keep an eye on.
Good. Okay. Yeah, that's also another one. Louise, great example. Yeah, like I was talking about earlier, maybe take an existing event and make it better. But the piggyback tactic is a great one as well. When you've got a food festival, as Louise said there, and then piggyback the food festival on the local arts festival. That's a brilliant idea. So you're not starting from scratch. Nicola Young, you had your hand up.
Hi, I did. Sorry. Yes. It was about Martin's Law. We recently had an SLCC branch meeting, and I've been onto the Protect UK website, and it's 4 events of about 100 or more with it that have a defined boundary. So it will affect events that we do put on. And I was just wondering if Mike had any more information around the type of risk assessments or things that we would have to do, because I don't have any idea apart from, but I've just obviously heard his comments, so I will wait to see what NALC or put out. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't really sort of elaborate any more than that. I had heard the figures and it hasn't been confirmed yet, but that would have an implication for all of our events. In terms of security, I would wait until now, because what I would do, I would consult now personally myself, and just to see, or your county association, just to see what implications this will have. So there might be some leeway with town and parish councils. We don't know yet, and for charities as well, for certain community events. But at the moment, it doesn't look as though there will be. It could be quite stringent. So there will be an implication, and financially that could be quite big, really. Yeah,
that's what I was thinking.
So yeah, sorry I haven't mentioned that yet. I'm just trying to put it off until actually.
Sorry, we're just it's fresh in my mind, but the protectuk.police.uk website gives some information about it. It will be coming in the spring, as you say, so we will have to use it for this year's summer event. So yeah.
Thank you, Nicola. Sue McKay, are you there? Sue, she had a question. Tips on attracting, well, you said this is a challenge, but tips on attracting teenagers to youth cinema.
Youth cinema, well, I was running an event recently. This was through Buckinghamshire, and Milton Keynes has some incredible councils there that are doing work. They have a lot of devolved services there through their city council, and they work very directly with youth providers, and they do go through those social media platforms that I said, that I mentioned, like the Instagram, the TikTok, YouTube, but mainly it's directly through youth group providers and also any people working in that field. So that's why I say it's the hardest thing, especially for local councils, especially given our demographic of most of us who are councillors or clerks. We tend to be, we're not teenagers or in our early 20s, most of us. So it is something that is a difficult one. I haven't got a magic wand, but I would go directly through any youth service providers that you have in your area and see what contacts they have, and they're able to reach people. So I don't know if that helps with your question.
I'm thinking about I've got a 15-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old. Why would they go? I mean, if you think we have a local cinema, they go to it every now and then, but obviously you have the advantage if you're a local cinema because it's easier for kids to travel, They don't have to go into the city, into the, you know, so they could access it by walking. But I think like my girls, like if there's like food involved, and it's kind of cheap and it's a good film, obviously that's yeah, that's kind of yeah, that they'll enjoy watching, but definitely like a package deal, maybe, you know, where there's food.
Good.
Yeah,
and knowing teenagers, it's that peer pressure as well. If one or two of their friends are going, the others will go. They won't go alone, but
no, yeah,
so
yeah,
it's been able to attract one or two, and it's almost like a catalyst, I suppose.
yes, yeah, cool. Any more? I haven't been too organized with the questions. If you have any more, feel free to just ask it right now. Unmute yourself and ask.
I saw one, John, that mentioned about there's no parking near their event.
Yes.
And I have seen in one or two places where they put on almost like a free park and ride. It's like that little minibus I showed, that you'd have somewhere where there was parking quite as close as possible to the event, and people could park there, and they would literally just ferry people back and forward. It's an added cost, I know, but sometimes you can get someone with a friendly person with a free minibus, or you might have to pay, but it is something worth considering if parking is a real issue.
Yeah. Lois came in there, another idea, get the teenagers involved in organising the event. Another really good ideas coming up on this chat. Jess will be writing a blog post probably, and we'll try and incorporate all those. But yeah, that is a good one. You know, you could give teenagers a job. They could run the local cinema, you know, and get paid, you know, potentially. Any other questions? Yeah, Youth Council.
Yeah, it's a good one. I think a lot of these things, it's that engagement part, isn't it? That it's got to come from what people want as well.
Yes.
Especially with that age group more than anything.
It goes to your, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, they have to be involved, don't they?
Yeah, it's your first couple of slides you brought up about target group and what you're trying to do, you know, for that target group. Anything else? Before we sign off, we've launched season 5 of Scribe Academy today. So we've got a whole bunch more talks lined up for the next 3 months. We actually have another one on purely risk management by BHIB insurance brokers on events. And we're really looking forward to this. CIA, we're calling it, Clerks in Action. So we've got 3 clerks to talk about good things they do in the community. Yeah, then we've got some VAT compliance, complete overview of accounting. I'm doing this one on how to generate and market your generate revenue and market your venues. And then we mentioned health and safety. Mike said so many councils don't have a health and safety policy. Alex Saunders, a partner at Leeds Price Solicitors, we're talking about 5 key documents which I think health and safety will be in there. So really great events lined up. Mike, thanks again. Really appreciate it. We'll share your contact details with everybody. Yeah, thanks for coming to see us again.
Okay, thanks, and John.
And
thanks
everyone else, take it easy, and yeah, let's all give Mike a clap there, clap and a wave. Thanks, Mike. Appreciated. Cheers. Have good days, everybody. Cheers.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye then.